Have you ever witnessed an act of courage that unleashed something beyond human comprehension? Where maternal instincts collided with forces that defied all prediction? Deep in the Amazon basin, a wildlife researcher's desperate mission to save a baby gorilla from a massive anaconda would trigger a mother's reaction so terrifying, so completely contrary to nature's expected gratitude, that it challenged everything experts believed about primate psychology and proved that sometimes heroism can awaken the very demons it seeks to vanquish. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Deep within Brazil's Amazon basin, where the mighty river winds through endless expanses of pristine rainforest toward the Atlantic's distant shores, lies one of South America's most remote and dangerous wilderness sanctuaries. This UNESCO-protected ecosystem encompasses millions of square kilometers of untouched jungle, where towering Brazil nut trees create living cathedrals beneath canopies so dense that sunlight penetrates in scattered emerald beams. The forest floor pulses with life, carpeted in decomposing leaves that release the rich, earthy scent of centuries-old growth cycles, feeding this incredible biodiversity hotspot. Countless tributaries wind through valleys wrapped in perpetual humidity, their dark waters mixing with the haunting calls of howler monkeys and the distant splashes of caimans navigating ancient territorial boundaries. Massive buttress roots create natural fortresses where countless species find sanctuary, while exotic bromeliads bloom in impossible colors along branches that have supported life for millennia. But the Amazon also harbors secrets that challenge our understanding of the complex relationships between conservation and the primal forces that govern wilderness survival. This is a place where the impossible becomes reality, where acts of heroism can trigger responses that transcend every scientific prediction about animal psychology. In these mystical depths, where endangered species cling to existence, while ancient predators perfect killing techniques unchanged since prehistoric times, the most well-intentioned interventions can unleash consequences that defy human comprehension. What was about to unfold in this pristine wilderness would prove that sometimes the most courageous acts of interspecies rescue can awaken maternal instincts so twisted by desperation that they transform protective love into something genuinely terrifying. This was a story that would challenge fundamental assumptions about primate behavior and reveal that beneath the surface of maternal devotion lies something far more complex and potentially dangerous than science had ever imagined. The extraordinary events that were about to transform both rescuer and rescued would prove that in nature's most desperate moments, when good intentions collide with ancient survival instincts, even the gentlest mothers can become the most terrifying forces imaginable, leaving everyone questioning whether some acts of heroism unleash demons that should have remained forever dormant. Working in the most dangerous front lines of Amazon conservation was Dr. Isabella Santos, a Brazilian primatologist whose 12-year mission to study critically endangered western lowland gorillas in their Amazon habitat had earned her both international recognition and the complex respect of indigenous communities who viewed her as a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern science. Standing just over 5.5 feet with powerful hands bearing countless scars from jungle expeditions, her dark eyes reflected the accumulated determination of someone who understood that these magnificent creatures were fighting their final battle for survival in an increasingly fragmented world. Dr. Santos operated from a floating research station that served as both mobile laboratory and emergency medical facility, equipped with specialized primate monitoring equipment alongside traditional Amazonian survival gear. Her fluent Portuguese and basic knowledge of local indigenous dialects had allowed her to work within territories that other researchers couldn't access, creating opportunities to study gorilla behaviors that remained hidden from mainstream scientific observation. But it was her personal connection to individual gorillas that made her work both extraordinary and emotionally devastating. Having spent over a decade observing the same family groups, Dr. Santos understood that these creatures possessed emotional lives as complex as human relationships, making every conservation victory personal and every threat a profound challenge to her dedication to protecting Earth's most endangered great apes. Deep within the research territory that Dr. Santos had been monitoring lived Esperanza, a 15-year-old female western lowland gorilla whose name meant hope in Spanish, a fitting tribute to her role as mother to one of the last infant gorillas born in this critically threatened Amazon population. Standing nearly 5.5 feet tall and weighing over 200 pounds, Esperanza's imposing frame was balanced by remarkably intelligent eyes that reflected both maternal tenderness and the hypervigilant wariness of a creature whose species teetered on the edge of extinction. Esperanza's infant son, Corazon, whose name meant heart in Portuguese, represented not just her offspring, but potentially the future of their entire population. At 8 months old, his playful curiosity and rapid development had made him the focus of intense protective behaviors that went beyond normal gorilla maternal instincts, suggesting psychological adaptations born of species-level desperation. That humid Wednesday afternoon settled peacefully over the Amazon's vast canopy, with golden sunlight filtering through layers of emerald foliage as Dr. Santos conducted her weekly population survey from her camouflaged observation blind overlooking Esperanza's family territory. The converted platform sat perfectly positioned 40 feet above the forest floor, providing clear sightlines while maintaining the respectful distance that had allowed her to study critically endangered gorilla behavior without disrupting their already fragmented social routines. The primatologist had settled into her routine documentation with the methodical precision of someone whose work carried the weight of species preservation on every data point collected. Her weathered hands moved efficiently between specialized camera equipment and detailed field notes, while her trained eyes tracked the subtle maternal interactions that revealed the complex emotional adaptations these gorillas had developed in response to their precarious survival situation. These afternoon observation sessions had become sacred ritual, moments of profound connection with creatures whose continued existence hung by threads so fragile that every behavioral study might be documenting the final chapters of their evolutionary story. The responsibility of witnessing potentially the last generation of Amazon gorillas added emotional weight to scientific observation that transformed routine research into historical documentation. 50 meters below her platform, Esperanza had positioned herself in her preferred afternoon location beneath a massive cecropia tree, where the natural canopy provided perfect shade while offering clear sightlines across multiple escape routes that her hypervigilant maternal instincts demanded. The magnificent gorilla sat methodically processing palm fruits while keeping one watchful eye on young Curaçao's increasingly adventurous exploration of the understory vegetation. Her maternal vigilance had intensified beyond normal gorilla behavior patterns, reflecting psychological adaptations that Dr. Santos theorized were responses to the extreme population pressure that made every infant survival critical to species continuation. Esperanza's constant scanning of the environment and her positioning near multiple escape routes suggested stress responses that went far beyond typical maternal caution. The forest soundscape was quintessentially Amazonian, the melodic calls of trogons echoing through the humid canopy, the distant splash of river dolphins in hidden tributaries, and the gentle rustle of leaves as countless creatures went about their routines in the complex ecosystem that had become these gorillas' final refuge. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Neither Dr. Santos nor Esperanza could know that this peaceful scene was about to explode into chaos that would test the very limits of maternal protective instincts. Dr. Santos's peaceful afternoon observation was suddenly shattered by sounds that sent ice through her veins, high-pitched gorilla distress calls cutting through the humid air with the unmistakable tone of genuine maternal panic. The vocalizations were coming from Esperanza's territory, but these weren't the typical warning calls used for minor threats or territorial disputes. This was something far more desperate, more primal, carrying the emotional weight of a mother facing her worst nightmare. The calls continued in frantic bursts, growing more anguished with each passing moment. Through her high-powered binoculars, Dr. Santos could see Esperanza moving with explosive urgency that gorillas displayed only in life-threatening emergencies. Her massive frame crashed through the undergrowth with complete abandonment of her usual careful, calculated movements, suggesting that Corazon was in mortal danger. Following the heartbreaking sounds with growing alarm, Dr. Santos began rapidly descending from her observation platform, her 12 years of Amazon research having taught her to distinguish between normal family communications and genuine crisis situations. What she was hearing fell squarely into the latter category, and the intensity suggested that the infant's survival was hanging in the balance. As she moved carefully through the dense vegetation toward the source of the distress calls, additional sounds began filtering through the humid air that made her blood freeze with recognition. The distinctive splashing and movement patterns of a massive anaconda in active hunting mode. These weren't the sounds of a serpent avoiding contact, but the aggressive water displacement of a predator that had successfully ambushed prey near the river's edge. Through gaps in the foliage, she began to catch glimpses of the riverbank ahead, where a small tributary created a natural watering hole surrounded by dense jungle. Esperanza's distress calls were definitely coming from that direction, mixed now with sounds that suggested a prolonged struggle between desperate mother and aquatic predator that far outweighed her in both size and killing capability. Dr. Santos found herself facing a crisis that challenged every principle of wildlife research ethics and species preservation priorities. Her professional training dictated non-interference with natural predator-prey relationships, but her personal investment in this critically endangered population was triggering protective responses that transcended scientific protocols. The increasingly desperate nature of Esperanza's calls indicated that whatever was happening had reached a critical phase where intervention might mean the difference between species survival and witnessing the final extinction of Amazon gorillas in her lifetime. As Dr. Santos crept through the final barrier of dense vegetation, the scene that greeted her was every conservationist's worst nightmare magnified by the stakes of species extinction. There, partially submerged in the dark tributary waters, was 8-month-old Corazon, the infant gorilla representing hope for his critically endangered population, now caught in the deadly coils of an enormous green anaconda that easily measured 25 feet in length and was thick as a tree trunk. The massive serpent had positioned itself with tactical precision in the shallow waters where gorillas came to drink, using the murky river as perfect camouflage for an ambush that had caught the curious infant completely off guard. Corazon's small head remained above water, his dark eyes wide with terror as the anaconda's muscular coils tightened incrementally around his tiny body with the methodical patience that made these aquatic predators among the Amazon's most efficient killers. What made the scene even more devastating was Corazon's obvious confusion and helplessness. The infant gorilla's weak whimpers echoed across the water as he struggled against coils that could crush an adult caiman, his tiny hands clawing helplessly at the smooth scales that held him in an inescapable prison of living muscle designed by millions of years of evolutionary perfection. Esperanza paced frantically along the riverbank in complete maternal anguish, her massive frame trembling with frustration and desperate protective rage. Her intelligence allowed her to understand exactly what was happening, but her natural behavioral patterns provided no framework for confronting a 25-foot aquatic predator whose home territory gave it insurmountable tactical advantages. The anaconda moved with the patience of a predator that understood water was its greatest ally. Its olive-green scales blended perfectly with the tributary's dark surface as it maintained steady pressure on Corazon's ribcage, waiting for the inevitable moment when the infant could no longer struggle against the dual threats of constriction and potential drowning. Most devastating was the calculated nature of the attack. This wasn't random predation. This was systematic exploitation of gorilla drinking behavior by a predator whose evolutionary programming had perfected aquatic ambush tactics that specifically targeted the water dependency of terrestrial mammals. Every element of the anaconda's positioning and technique spoke of intelligence that had learned to exploit the behavioral necessities of its prey with deadly precision that left no possibility for conventional escape. The sight before her triggered something profound within Dr. Santos's consciousness, an emotional response that transcended her professional training and reached directly into the deepest core of her dedication to species preservation. Corazon's weak whimpers and Esperanza's desperate maternal anguish seemed to bypass every scientific protocol she had learned, appealing directly to protective instincts that had nothing to do with research ethics and everything to do with preventing the potential extinction of an entire population through the loss of a single infant. Standing at the tributary's edge, Dr. Santos found herself facing an impossible situation that went far beyond her expertise as behavioral researcher. The 25-foot anaconda represented one of the Amazon's most formidable predators, a creature whose aquatic advantages and crushing power made it nearly invincible in its chosen hunting environment. Its muscular coils could easily break human bones, and its defensive capabilities in water gave it tactical superiority that no terrestrial intervention could overcome. More critically, any aggressive approach might cause the serpent to drag Corazon deeper into the tributary, where drowning would end his life even faster than constriction. Dr. Santos's years of studying anaconda behavior told her that the infant was already showing signs of respiratory distress that indicated very little time remained before irreversible damage occurred to his developing nervous system. Yet something deeper than logic was driving her response. The sight of Esperanza's helpless circling and her obvious emotional devastation was triggering protective responses that transcended species boundaries and professional obligations. This wasn't just a research subject, this was an individual she had known since birth, whose survival carried the weight of an entire population's future on his tiny shoulders. Dr. Santos transformed from passive observer to active catalyst when she made a desperate decision that abandoned every protocol in wildlife research ethics. She waded directly into the tributary with nothing but a machete and 12 years of understanding anaconda behavior to guide her actions. Her choice was calculated but desperate. If Corazon died, she would be witnessing the potential beginning of the end for Amazon gorillas, a responsibility that outweighed every professional consideration. Speaking in the soft rhythmic vocalizations she had learned from years of gorilla observation, Dr. Santos announced her presence to Esperanza while keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening despite the urgency of the situation. The remarkable moment came when the distraught mother, instead of displaying territorial aggression toward a human entering her family's crisis zone, seemed to recognize Dr. Santos's intent and began coordinating her movements to support the rescue attempt. Working with practiced efficiency born of countless Amazon emergencies, Dr. Santos activated her emergency beacon and began transmitting distress signals, knowing that conventional rescue would take hours while Corazon had minutes. Her satellite communication equipment sent coordinates to indigenous river communities whose traditional knowledge of anaconda behavior might provide backup support, but the immediate crisis required action that couldn't wait for assistance. The breakthrough moment came when Dr. Santos began using her machete to create vibrations in the water that forced the anaconda to shift its attention between maintaining its grip on Corazon and defending against the new threat approaching through its aquatic domain. Her years of studying serpent behavior had taught her that anacondas could be manipulated through strategic disturbances to their sensory environment, but she had never attempted this knowledge in a life-or-death situation. What happened next defied every assumption about interspecies cooperation under extreme stress. Esperanza, observing Dr. Santos's tactical approach, began creating coordinated disturbances from the riverbank that forced the anaconda to divide its attention between multiple perceived threats. The gorilla mother's intelligence allowed her to understand that human intervention represented Corazon's only chance for survival, triggering cooperative behavior that transcended normal maternal territorial responses. The unlikely rescue team of desperate mother and determined researcher created pressure that began forcing the anaconda to reconsider its tactical position, but success would require precision that could easily become disaster. The coordinated rescue effort that unfolded challenged every principle of wildlife behavior Dr. Santos had studied throughout her career. Working in unprecedented harmony with Esperanza, she applied strategic pressure to the anaconda's midsection, while the gorilla mother created riverbank disturbances that forced the massive serpent to divide its attention between maintaining its deadly grip and defending against multiple threats approaching from different angles. The breakthrough came when Dr. Santos's tactical maneuvering found a vulnerable spot where the anaconda's coils were forced to adjust due to the shallow water depth. In that critical moment, Esperanza demonstrated intelligence that left the primatologist speechless. The desperate mother began using broken branches to create water disturbances that perfectly coordinated with Dr. Santos's movements, maximizing the effectiveness of their combined pressure on the confused predator. Working with split-second timing that seemed impossible between species that had never practiced such cooperation, the unlikely rescue team began systematically forcing the anaconda to loosen its death grip. Each coordinated effort created small opportunities for Corazon to draw deeper breaths, buying precious time while they worked to exploit the serpent's tactical disadvantages in the shallow tributary waters. Dr. Santos's emergency communications had finally reached indigenous river communities, and the distant sound of approaching boats indicated that traditional snake handlers were en route with specialized equipment. But the immediate crisis required continued coordination between human and gorilla that transcended every known boundary of interspecies cooperation under extreme stress conditions. The critical moment arrived when the anaconda, overwhelmed by attacks from multiple directions and unable to maintain its tactical superiority in the increasingly disturbed water, began releasing its coils to prepare for defensive retreat toward deeper sections of the tributary. Dr. Santos quickly moved to extract Corazon from the loosening grip, while Esperanza positioned herself to block the serpent's escape route. As Corazon finally broke free from the anaconda's deadly embrace, weak but breathing and apparently uninjured, the immediate danger seemed to have passed. The infant gorilla stumbled toward the safety of dry land, while Dr. Santos backed away from the retreating serpent, believing that their unprecedented cooperation had successfully resolved the crisis.
But what happened next would reveal that their intervention had triggered something in Esperanza that went far beyond maternal relief, something primal and terrifying that would challenge everything Dr. Santos thought she understood about gorilla psychology.
What unfolded next would be remembered as one of the most terrifying displays of maternal protective instinct gone catastrophically wrong. As Corazon reached safety, Esperanza's demeanor underwent a transformation that left Doctora Santos frozen with horror. The gorilla mother's eyes, which moments before had reflected cooperative intelligence, now blazed with something primal and utterly alien, a rage so pure and focused that it transcended normal gorilla behavioral patterns. Instead of the gratitude Doctora Santos expected, Esperanza turned toward her with aggressive posturing that suggested the rescue had triggered territorial responses beyond human comprehension. The massive gorilla's chest-beating display wasn't celebratory. It was a declaration of war against the human who had dared to touch her infant, regardless of the life-saving intent behind the action. The mother's logic was terrifyingly simple. Any creature that could reach Corazon during a crisis was a potential future threat that needed immediate elimination. Doctora Santos realized with growing terror that her heroic intervention had marked her as the most dangerous entity in Esperanza's world, not the anaconda that had nearly killed her son, but the human who had proven capable of accessing him during his most vulnerable moment. Esperanza's attack was swift and devastating, her powerful arms reaching for Doctora Santos with lethal intent that left no doubt about her maternal programming. Anything that could save her infant could also harm him, and such threats required permanent removal.
Dr. Santos's survival depended on the arriving indigenous rescue team, whose traditional knowledge of gorilla behavior allowed them to create distractions that enabled her escape with severe injuries that ended her field research career. The terrifying encounter revealed the dangerous complexity of maternal protective instincts pushed beyond normal behavioral boundaries by species-level desperation. Esperanza's violent response wasn't ingratitude. It was hyper-protective programming that viewed any creature capable of reaching her infant as an existential threat requiring elimination. The rescue had saved Corazon, but triggered primal responses that transformed cooperative partner into deadly enemy within moments. Today, Corazon thrives as one of the Amazon's last gorillas, while Dr. Santos continues her research from safe distances, forever changed by the terrifying lesson that maternal love, when pushed to extinction-level desperation, can become the most dangerous force in nature. Their story serves as a haunting reminder that even the most heroic interventions can awaken forces beyond human understanding, proving that sometimes saving a life unleashes consequences more terrifying than the original threat.
Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.